Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about this big lawsuit. Yes, MLW, Major League Wrestling, has filed a lawsuit against WWE. Now, we'll get into what the lawsuit's about, if it has any merit, if it's actually going to mean anything in general. But it's certainly a big story and certainly made some waves last night when it was released to all of the wrestling websites, released to the media that this lawsuit had been filed. So MLW has filed an antitrust lawsuit against WWE. Now, full disclosure here, I'm not a legal expert, so we're not going to get into the full legalese of all of this. But MLW announced yesterday evening that the lawsuit was filed earlier on in the day in federal court. The lawsuit is based on, quote, WWE's ongoing attempts to undermine competition in and monopolize the professional wrestling market by interfering with MLW's contracts and business prospects. Now, MLW's announcement on the lawsuit included the following allegations against WWE, noting a WWE person or the WWE in general had pressured third parties to abandon contracts and prospective relationships with MLW, including a major streaming deal with the company. It was also alleged that in early 2021, a then WWE executive warned Vice TV that WWE chairman and CEO Vince McMahon was, quote, pissed that Vice was airing MLW programming and that Vice should stop working with the promotion. So this is what the press release said, quote, as described in the complaint, WWE pressured third parties to abandon contracts and prospective relationships with MLW. WWE's misconduct included disrupting every level of MLW's business, including a major streaming deal for MLW, which could have been transformative for the company. MLW also alleged in the complaint that in early 2021, after MLW announced that they were in talks with Vice TV to air MLW programs on Vice TV, a then WWE executive warned Vice TV that WWE owner Vince McMahon was, quote, pissed that Vice TV was airing MLW programs and that Vice should stop working with MLW. The Vice TV executive responded that WWE's conduct was illegal and an antitrust violation, with the WWE executive responding that she could not control McMahon. So it's a really, really interesting one. MLW CEO Court Bauer provided a statement on this lawsuit and said the behavior has to stop. He said, quote, WWE has been wrongfully depriving its competitors of critical opportunities for many years, but its latest conduct has been even more unconscionable. I think we speak for the rest of the professional wrestling world when we say that this anti-competitive behavior has to stop. Now, it's interesting here because Chuck Carroll of CBS Sports noted that the lawsuit alleges that Stephanie McMahon managed to end MLW's deal with Tubi streaming service, which is now owned by Fox. And McMahon allegedly threatened that Fox could, quote, lose WWE's business or preferred content if Tubi did not acquiesce to the WWE's demand. Now, MLW received a letter that the deal was terminated the night before they planned to announce it publicly. So WWE has issued a statement, it must be said, and it's always two sides to every story. So WWE has released a statement saying, quote, WWE believes these claims have no merit and intends to vigorously defend itself against them. That's all they've had to say on the situation. So, obviously, look, it got a lot of attention last night when this lawsuit was filed. Does WWE do this? Absolutely. They do. They absolutely do it. And are WWE guilty of pressuring companies to drop professional wrestling programming? It wouldn't be the first time, put it that way. This is a company that counter programs other pro wrestling companies. This is a company that, I mean, we talk about like Starrcade, right? We talk about Starrcade and all of the WCW events on pay-per-view in the mid 80s, late 80s, that WWE pressured the cable companies to drop them or they wouldn't have WrestleMania and all this kind of stuff. WWE has done this for years. So MLW filing a lawsuit, I would say good for them, and it's them taking a stand against WWE. The only issue that I kind of have with it, and it's not in the sense that MLW is in the wrong here, because they're not. They're in the right. They're fighting back against WWE, but will they win here? WWE's record when it comes to lawsuits is incredibly good, even when sometimes they are in the wrong. They're a billion-dollar publicly traded company. They've got a lot of money to defend themselves, and sometimes when it comes to lawsuits, it's not necessarily a case of right and wrong. It's a case of who's got the more money. to defend themselves or reach a settlement. I think, and again, I'm no legal expert, so take this with a pinch of salt. This is just my opinion, but I wouldn't be surprised if we reach a situation where it's a case of MLW and WWE settling out of court. Maybe WWE pays MLW a nice fee, or maybe it goes all of the way. If MLW could get a victory against WWE in court, it would be a big deal. It would certainly be a sign that times are changing. But like I said, when it comes to this lawsuit, has WWE done this in the past? Of course they have. Of course they have. They've set a precedent for doing it. But also, like I said, they've got a very, very strong legal team. They get sued pretty much every day by so many people, and they win the majority of their cases. I wouldn't be surprised if a judge dismisses it, if they settle out of court, or something of that nature. Again, I don't know. I'm not a legal expert, but it certainly is an interesting one to watch. I do remember the MLW in, when was it, 2020, 2021? It might have even been 2019 when they announced that they were negotiating with Vice, and the feeling was that MLW's weekly programming, whether it's Fusion or whatever, was going to air on Vice TV. It didn't happen. Since then, we have had some programming on Vice, but not certainly a weekly situation. The Chibi one's interesting because it makes logical sense, doesn't it, that Chibi's owned by Fox, WWE has an agreement with Fox, and then WWE pressurizes Fox to drop MLW programming. But in the same time, stuff like that happens a lot, not even just in pro wrestling, outside of pro wrestling, whether it's sports, entertainment, you name it. They'll drop competitors. So I don't know. Like I said, good for MLW for making a stand. Good for MLW for trying to stand up to WWE. But also, do I expect it to go anywhere? No. To be honest, I really, really don't. Let's talk about the Royal Rumble. There's spoilers ahead here, so if you don't want to be spoiled for this, skip ahead to later on in the video. But WWE reportedly has plans for at least 2 more former superstars to return for the 30-woman Royal Rumble match later on this month. The current plan is for Cameron, former WWE superstar, and Funkadactyl Cameron, former tag team partner of Naomi Cameron, and former WWE Women's Champion Melina to be entrants into the Women's Royal Rumble match. This is according to a report by PW Insider. Now, there's no word yet on if WWE will announce them ahead of time or if there'll be surprise entrants revealed on the day of the show. Now, obviously, this is the first of, well, this is several surprises that have already been announced. Melina's an interesting one because I recall in 2020, wasn't there? There was that whole thing with Melina of she was coming back, she signed a deal with WWE and it never happened. And she came out and went, no, I haven't even been negotiating. She appeared, I think, on a Legends Raw or something, but she's been wrestling for the NWA. She wrestled a period for Impact last year as part of this NWA Empower crossover. Cameron, I recall Cameron doing several interviews saying she wanted to go back and she was interested to go back to WWE. I don't think this will lead to a full-time return by any stretch of the imagination, but expect more surprises. The other report we saw the other day was that WWE was really not looking to have many, if any, NXT superstars in the Women's Royal Rumble match. They wanted to fill it up with main roster competitors and legends. Problem is, they don't even have 30 main roster females competing right now. So they're going to rely heavily on the legends, and that's the situation there. Speaking of NXT, though, we have an update when it comes to NXT, the creative situation there. Obviously, there's been wholesale changes when it comes to NXT 2.0. Different philosophy when it comes to the talent they're signing, different philosophy when it comes to the presentation, different philosophy, practically everything when it comes to WWE's developmental territory, which is why we've seen so many people let go, budget cuts, people actually inside the Performance Center, people like Samoa Joe, William Regal, Gabe Sapolsky, etc., all let go. Scott Armstrong was another name. While WWE has reportedly made changes also to the creative team setup when it comes to NXT 2.0. Now, according once again to PWInsider.com, things will be getting switched around internally with the third brand continuing to evolve. Now, these alterations come following the recent releases. As I mentioned, WWE cut several long-term employees during the latest batch of cuts. The focus was more behind the scenes than in-ring talents, although Samoa Joe was released as well, also with the likes of Timothy Thatcher and I think it was Danny Burch also released too. The company let go, as I mentioned, the likes of Gabe Sapolsky, William Regal, and Road Dogg during this shuffle. Now, moving forward, the WWE NXT creative team will not operate independently as it has done in the past. Previously, Triple H, Paul Levesque, oversaw things with his own team, which was completely separate from everything else in WWE. So Raw and SmackDown had their creative teams, which were kind of overseen by Executive Director Bruce Pritchard, but NXT, as its third brand, was completely in its own universe and operated as its own entity. That's no longer the case. Instead, the NXT creative team will now work under Bruce Pritchard and Christine Lebrano. Decisions will be reported to them, with WWE looking to streamline the operation to be more consistent with how Raw and SmackDown and their creative departments work. Now, Johnny Russo, no relation to Vince, will be heading up NXT's writing team, working under Pritchard and Lebrano. He joined WWE in 2011 and has ascended up the WWE corporate ladder since then. Russo has also been working as the lead writer of the show since July of 2020. Therefore, he obviously knows how things work. Elsewhere on the creative team, Dewey Foley, of course, is the son of Mick Foley, WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley, will remain on the team. He's been working on the 205 Live product as well, as if that means anything. They still have 205 Live, even though they don't have a cruiserweight division anymore. Okay. Look, when it comes to NXT, I've said this several times, and I do think my opinion is slightly different than quite a few people. I understand. I really do. I really understand the logic of what WWE is trying to achieve with this sort of restructuring of NXT. And not necessarily, I don't agree with it. I can understand the logic behind it of them saying we need to be younger, we need to just change because maybe it isn't working. And we complain about things being stagnant on Raw or SmackDown. Maybe they do need to create new stars. Have they created any new stars in the past decade? Not really. You know, a handful at most, but certainly not from the Performance Center or NXT. So I understand them going, well, maybe it all needs to change. I don't necessarily agree with it. Again, I don't think I think the idea of having, you know, NXT be overseen by the people that oversee Raw or SmackDown, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, in the sense that if we do get emotionally invested in characters on NXT, they're not going to be changed to Raw or SmackDown like they have been in the past. So I don't know, maybe it's a stitch in time saves nine kind of situation, but at this point I'm kind of just over the outrage of NXT not being what it was, because I think if we get outraged and say, oh, it's not the NXT as we know it, or the NXT that we loved and enjoyed, those days are gone, unfortunately, and we can bitch and moan as much as we want, they're not coming back. Let's talk about Seth Rollins. There's an interesting story about Seth Rollins. We know a lot of plans when it comes to Seth Rollins have changed recently. Of course, he was scheduled to win the WWE Championship at day one. That's not happening now, or it didn't happen. Brock Lesnar's the WWE Champion. He's now facing Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble too. Well, we have an update when it comes to Seth Rollins and his previously scheduled WrestleMania opponent. So it was previously reported, as I mentioned, that Seth Rollins was set to win the WWE Championship at day one. Rollins was then scheduled to defend it at WrestleMania, although no reports was out there about his potential opponent for the event. Now, obviously, those plans, like with everything in WWE, were changed after Roman Reigns tested positive for COVID-19. Wow. On the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, Dave Meltzer noted that the original plan for WrestleMania 38 was for Seth Rollins to face Big E for the WWE Championship. Meltzer mentioned that he was not told if the planned match would still be going ahead at WrestleMania, or if it was the planned main event. It was recently reported that actually WWE's plans for WrestleMania remained intact, despite these plans changing. I don't really buy that at this point. If it was the case, I was thinking this the other day, if the plans are still in place and the same plans are going to happen at WrestleMania, and you had Seth Rollins facing Big E for the WWE Championship, how do you get there? You either have to have Rollins beat Reigns for the Universal Championship and then face Big E, who maybe wins the Rumble at WrestleMania. That isn't happening because Reigns isn't losing. So unless you have Rollins defeat Brock Lesnar, say at February's pay-per-view, maybe at Fastlane or something like that, or in Saudi Arabia, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe we are going in the same direction. I just don't think that's the case. But interesting, and I thought this as well watching Raw on Monday, that if that is still one of the main events for WrestleMania, they did it on Raw in January and Big E lost. It doesn't feel very special by the time WrestleMania comes around, would it? It's just something worth considering there. Finally, we have a health update when it comes to Drew McIntyre. Of course, Drew McIntyre's on the shelf at the moment. He's dealing with a neck injury. Well, in an update, Drew McIntyre has been in Pittsburgh this week to undergo tests on his neck. As noted, McIntyre defeated Madcap Moss at the recent Day 1 event, but he was written out of the storylines for a backstage attack by Moss and Happy Corbin. WWE then announced that McIntyre had suffered a cervical neck strain with severe contusions to the neck. They love their really long injuries, don't they? But it was then reported that the beatdown angle was done because he has been dealing with legitimate neck issues for several weeks. McIntyre needed to undergo medical testing on his neck, which is why WWE roped him out of storylines as a way to be proactive about the situation. In an update, McIntyre is still sporting a neck brace and has been seen at the hospital in Pittsburgh this past week, according to PW Insider. That is the facility where WWE talents have been sent to when they undergo surgery or testing, where Dr. Joseph Maroon works. McIntyre's neck problems were described as, quote, nagging issues that have been bothering for several weeks. So we don't know. We don't know how serious this is. It could be really serious. It could be quite minor as well. He's getting tested at the moment. I hope that he's not out for a while. The issue is just, as we know, as pro wrestling fans, necks are nothing to mess with, are they? So fingers crossed, Drew McIntyre, it's not that serious and he can recover soon. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Get the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.